Welcome to the Node.js build workgroup meeting for February 13th, 2025. Before we get started, does anybody have any announcements they'd like to make? Okay. Next, we'll move over to the issues that were tagged. So the first one is Equinix Metal Sunset.
So this one, if I remember correctly, was mainly the question was around the works on ARM machines. So we already have another issue later on in the agenda to cover the x64 machines, and there's a remaining question about is the ARM servers that we're getting through the works on ARM program going to be affected by the Equinix Metal sunset? I haven't heard anything else from Ed, so I guess at some point we might follow up to see if there's any more news on that front. We've got a bit of time, but I guess the main point is finding out if we need to find alternate resources. So yeah, that's no news, I guess, on that for the
So we're
moment.
waiting to hear from Ed what this means to the project. Okay.
And he is aware of this. He responded in the issue that he said he'll let us know when he knows more. So at some point we can reach out and say, hey, have you found anything out? Yeah.
Okay. So it's not urgent, but it's good to have on the agenda so we don't forget. Go ahead,
Yeah,
Ron.
I just had a couple questions about the nature of that works on ARM relationship. Was that something that Equinix and ARM established, or was that something that ARM established with us and then we reached out to Equinix, or what was the?
We had to apply in a GitHub repo that the Works on ARM project had. I don't know if that's still the process, but we as a project applied, if I remember correctly. I can't remember. Michael, do you remember?
I believe we did, and I think what complicates things is there's been several sort of purchases slash takeovers slash whatever, right? So there was this program works on ARM, which we applied to and got some machines. I don't think Equinix was involved in that at the time, but then at some point Equinix purchased or whatever wherever things were being hosted through works on ARM, and so like now it's
But Works on ARM is separate from Equinix. It's part of like the ARM. It's not a specific Equinix program. It's an ARM program, but
right.
our resources happen to be on Equinix. So there was a case where we actually had x64 servers in the same account that the Works on ARM stuff was, and Equinix came to us and said, that was causing issues with like billing and associating costs and resources. So that's why we ended up separating out the x64 things into a separate account. So in terms of the actual Works on ARM account, that's not anything that we have admin access to, but we can see the machines that they have allocated for us. So yeah.
Yeah, I guess I'm curious if the like who does have admin access to that? Just Equinix, or is there somebody at the Works on ARM program that
I
has
think it's
access
someone
to it?
on the Works on ARM program, although I think Ed might as well. So Ed works for Equinix and has
Right.
been our contact point. So usually anything in that front has gone through him, or I think at one point we were asked to renew or to reconfirm, and that was via this repository that they had that they were tracking applications for. So it wasn't just us. We could see a whole bunch of other projects applying for things. I can try and track that up outside of this meeting and
Yeah,
pass
I'm just
them.
wondering if there's someone at Works on
There's
ARM that
probably
needs
some GitHub issues somewhere that in the build repo. But yeah, I can try and dig those up. But yeah, you're right. There might be people who worked on ARM program we could ask.
I think
Yeah,
isn't Ed with them?
No, Ed is with Equinix.
Okay, Ed is with that. Okay.
Well, my understanding is Ed is employed by Equinix,
Right.
and then we get, I think each year, someone from Works on ARM reaches out and says, "Hey, could you tell us what you're doing with your resources?" And we just say, "Yeah, we're continuing to build Node." That person is from the Works on ARM program, so again, maybe that's an avenue. Although I don't know if that's more marketing than account management. I don't know. I mean, we have it. It's
Yeah.
a thing.
Yeah, and I think we can, we can hear, like, it'd be interesting to hear what Ed tells us, and then based on that, we can figure out what to do.
Yep.
Yeah,
I'm looking at the Works on ARM page, and they have a bunch of different. It says initiative to streamline software development on ARM with free cloud resources, and they actually show a bunch of different, like even
They
the
show a bunch of different
YSL that
providers.
we already have an agreement with is listed there, and AWS. So anyway, yeah, okay.
So yeah, I mean the first question is, does that continue and we still get the resources we've got? And then if the answer is no, then we have a puzzle to solve. But yeah, at the moment we don't know what the answers to those are. So yeah.
yeah. My read on it was that Equinix Metal was completely shutting down, and so there wouldn't
Yes.
be any machines. So it sounds like we need to move the Works on ARM stuff somewhere.
Maybe. Or
And
maybe they'll move it forward. I don't know. So I'm speculating this. But so
yeah,
we have had moves before where they've like replaced the hardware and then they've done the migration. Well, I think we ended up having to do a lot of the heavy duty migration anyway. But yeah, they've helped us through that. So there has been activity in terms of migration. So at one point we were on older hardware and then they introduced Ultras. So, there was a whole shift still within Equinix, but, through the
mhm.
works of ARM. So yeah, it's I don't know. I mean, I presume Equinix will still have an offering. It just won't be the bare metal servers. So I don't know what happens to the ARM stuff because I presume the ARM stuff is bare metal, but maybe they'll have an offering that's virtualized on it. I don't know. So
Got it.
again, we can speculate, but
Yeah, I'm just trying to get in front of it to make sure that it doesn't
no,
end up being
yeah.
like last week in May. They're like, okay, here's the new servers. We need to switch it all
Well,
over in a week. And
so I'm aware of there's two deadlines. So there's a deadline this year after which they said anything you were getting for, via credits, they will stop the credits and you will stop being billed. So for the x64 servers that we still haven't quite migrated yet, that is a risk in terms of I presume then that we'd have to ask the foundation to cover any costs if we haven't deleted decommissioned the x64
mhm.
machines by May of this year. Metal sunsets next year in 2026. So again, I don't want to be in this position this time next year, but it's not quite the immediate pressure in terms of I'm assuming because the works on stuff is under a different. It's not through Equinix credits; it's through a different funding program. So it is a valid question as to
Uh,
what's going on with that program, but it doesn't directly apply to the announcements that have come out of Equinix Metal. But you are right; it is all hosted on Equinix Metal, so there is an assumption. Well, not there is a big question as to what is happening there.
and sorry, and it just
Yeah.
dawned on me that this is June 2026, not
Yeah.
2025. That key piece of information just changed my whole like, oh, what are we doing? We only have a few months. Okay.
That is that's the hard sunset of Equinix Metal, but there is a softer deadline. Well, I say soft. There is a deadline this year, after which
Yes.
it said that your accounts will be charged for resources that you previously had credits for. So that's the x64 stuff we would
Is that
actually no,
covered under the
true.
next issue
No, no,
in
no.
the agenda?
Well, yeah, that might come on the next issue. I am wondering about that now because I guess that was under the MNX account, wasn't it? So we have migrated the stuff. We had the three accounts.
Right.
Works on ARM,
And
which we don't admin. The Node.js account that I set up that we were asked to separate the x64 servers out from the Works on ARM account. That one we have migrated everything. So there's
right,
nothing in that account. And
right.
then there's the Equinix MNX account, which is the one that we still have machines on. And I'm guessing MNX were covering that. I can't remember how that was funded, or maybe Equinix was covering that. I don't know, but yeah, I mean, of the deadlines, there is a hard deadline next year, but then there is another deadline this year, which is to do with the other later issues on this agenda.
But
Which
you're
I guess
confident those are just the x86 x64 machines, or
in terms of what we've been getting credits for, yes.
yeah, okay, good.
Yeah. Um,
I was gonna say like maybe we should ask for some resources from OSL. Like,
Well,
wouldn't
we
it be
have
good
them.
to have some like
We
from
have
ARM,
resources from OSU. They're
right?
just
Do we have ARM machines that are equivalent
yes.
to the?
I had to because they booted us off the. We lost our release machine.
Okay,
Um, so our release machine is at OSL, and we have another machine as a sort of test machine. The
okay,
issue there is they are vastly less powerful than the Ultras at Equinix. Um,
right.
so they are much lower total memory, much lower number of CPUs. We could possibly get by on those, but I mean that would be a huge reduction in
Yeah, yeah, okay. I was just
throughput.
like, it'd be good to have redundancy. If I already have machines there, um,
We have machines there, so yeah, I mean I think if we are told that the existing works on stuff, we have to rehouse, then we can make a decision as to do we think we can get by with the resources that we have, or do we have to ask for more or find another, another provider.
was
Um,
it like our other OSL ones where like here's your envelope and we created the machines that we wanted from
It's an
that?
OpenStack instance, yes.
Yeah,
So
okay.
we have a number of virtual CPUs and virtual memory to
Okay.
create instances on an OpenStack instance. So it's a separate OpenStack instance from the Power machine,
Yep.
but they're hosted at OSU. So we applied and it was fairly straightforward. Yeah, we'll give you resources, and then we set one up mainly for the release machine, and then we created a test machine so that should the Equinix resources have a temporary blip or
Yep.
outage, we continue running. But it is much vastly less capacity wise.
Right. So trying to ask for an equivalent amount is probably outside the
It's a
envelope of what they
different
usually give.
hardware generation, so it's not even equivalent hardware. It's older
Okay.
ARM hardware, but
Yeah.
still adequate enough for us to do what we've been doing, albeit slower.
Okay. So it sounds like basically it's still wait and see what it actually means.
Yeah, I can see if I can gather stuff, and maybe it is worth sending an email just to, you know,
Yeah, it wouldn't hurt to
yeah,
follow up.
I'll take care of that.
Okay.
should we talk about the other Equinix issue immediately after this? Like put
I
them
think that's
together
the
and
next one. It says, yeah, or well, it's not the next one, but yeah, let's go to that one. So new
yeah.
machine requirement replacement for Equinix x64 servers.
Okay, so status update on this. All of the SmartOS stuff has been moved. Everything has been moved with the exception of there are 3 machines that are still provisioned. One of them in the issue we determined isn't being used for anything and we don't really need. There was a Ubuntu 1804, something labeled with that. It's not being used for anything. The Grafana machine is also we determined that it's not providing any value right now, and it was down for months, and no one's really looking at it, so it doesn't necessarily need to be migrated. We should come up with a different monitoring solution. Um, and then finally, there was one more machine that has not been migrated yet, and I wanted to ask about what its role is in the current infrastructure, given the changes that we've had with the way that we're delivering the node.js downloads. So it's the unencrypted machine that acts as like a secondary failover for the main web nodes. How often is that being used, and is it being used at all now, or is everything being delivered by the workers in R2? Like what role does it play? Is it still essential? Is it still like what is it for?
So it is still configured in Cloudflare, although so downloads and well, it's mainly downloads. The website's been moved to the cell. So downloads now are mainly being served through R2. We have seen very little. So we used to get lots of failover notices from Cloudflare saying the DigitalOcean droplet's fallen over, which presumably means it switches over to the unencrypted server. I think I've only seen it happen once in the last couple of months. And that was a surprise because we just hadn't seen them since we switched over to R2.
Yeah,
So
I'm really surprised we got one.
it's technically still on the sort of failover path, but it's not even like so before where we were primarily serving from DigitalOcean, it was the failover. It's
Right.
now like a failover of a failover. Although I suppose, you know, No, that's not even true, is it? So we are staging stuff on R2. So in theory, the download traffic should be mainly in R2. And I'm not certain in what circumstances it's hitting the DigitalOcean droplet, if at all.
I mean,
Um, yeah, it's
and it,
configured to, but I just don't know in what circumstances Cloudflare itself would fall over, R2 would fall over, but the rest of Cloudflare would still be there to route you to uh,
right.
the DigitalOcean drop. So I think we probably in a meeting you weren't able to attend. I think we did have a discussion as what maybe that unencrypted server isn't needed now, and then I think Michael suggested, well, maybe we could have some brownouts, and then it was like, if we have brownouts, that probably suggests we need to keep it around, to brown out and bring it back up. So I think this is a sort of hesitant think. I think it's not needed now.
Hmm.
And the question is, do we agree as a group that we can just not migrate it?
So it's not used at all during the release process, right?
It never was directly. So what it does is it's got a I can't remember if it's a cron service or a system D timer. It's one of the two that
Yep.
runs rsync to the DigitalOcean
Yep.
droplet. So it's asynchronously using rsync to sync the stuff from the DigitalOcean droplet across to unencrypted. Um, I think it's running on unencrypted, so it's pulling from the DigitalOcean droplet. So the release process interacts with R2 and the DigitalOcean droplet. It doesn't actually directly interact with unencrypted. Um,
Yeah.
so
And nothing is served from it anymore. It sounds like even like unencrypted dot whatever won't go there.
no, unencrypted does go there. Unencrypted and direct do not go through Cloudflare CDN. They go directly to the machines themselves. We
So
can redirect unencrypted somewhere else. So the only question is anyone using unencrypted, I guess, as an rsync endpoint, which I guess you could do. I don't know the answer to that.
but is there
Are
any
there
reason that redirecting it to the other one wouldn't work? If we say like we're like we don't think we need it, but like let's redirect that and then turn it off for like a day and see if anybody complains, right? Is that
Maybe. Um, I think we could. I mean, it's fairly simple, I guess, to to change the redirection in. It's basically a DNS entry, right? So you change
Mhm.
the DNS entry in Cloudflare, and you just point it so we could point it back at the DigitalOcean droplet, or I guess
because
that
I
would be.
think unencrypted we said like if I remember we actually it's not unencrypted anymore.
Yeah, we turned on HS. Is it HSTS? The
Right.
HTTPS redirection stuff. I I mean, even if we were running unencrypted HTTP over it, there was a sunset notice on that, which was like years ago.
Right.
So at the point we turned on HSTS, it was like, yeah, people have had enough warning. If
Right.
the
Yep.
if the unencrypted, if the plain HTTP endpoint stops working, well, they were warned, years ago.
Right. Yep.
Um, so again, on that front, maybe we just bite that bullet, redirect it, see if nothing happens over, see if no one complains over the next week or two. But even if they do complain, I guess we evaluate, is that still a use case we want to cover?
Yeah, like you know, maybe we hope for the easy case, right? Like if there was a redirect, like the redirect should get
I
them
mean,
the
it's not
same
it's not
thing.
really a redirect. It's just changing where the DNS entry points to,
Right.
and it will only affect people then coming to that endpoint using that DNS subdomain. Um,
Right. And would that like what would that like it's all the other machine has all the same things. Like the main difference was it was unencrypted before, but like we've already changed that.
yeah, and it was on a different provider. So
Right. Sure, there
but
was
yeah,
some
I mean,
redundancy.
but in terms of sunsetting, yeah, I think maybe if we just update unencrypted's DNS entry, I guess point it at the DigitalOcean one, and then see if there are any issues. Yeah, maybe it will increase load on the droplet, but then we think we've taken all the load off it by moving everything to R2 anyway. Um, I guess, does anyone have any concerns if we were to change, update unencrypted's endpoint DNS entry to point to the existing DigitalOcean droplet and then see if there are any issues?
I don't
What's the
think so. Go ahead, Ryan.
what's the rsync endpoint that it's offering? Is that also available on not unencrypted on the web?
I would need to dig again. So it's not something I've used, but at one point unencrypted did offer a non-HTTPS endpoint. It was basically a Nginx serving stuff over plain HTTP rather than HTTPS. And I think people were rsyncing from it.
There's still I'm looking at the rsync logs on
Yeah.
unencrypted right now, and there's still about 20 or 30 hosts a day connecting to it.
So yeah, I presume maybe then if they're going over, if rsync is not, HTTPS, if that's plain HTTP, then maybe swapping that to direct might break all those. But we did have, so again, I guess the issue there is, did anyone see it? But for years we had a deprecation notice on unencrypted that said we were going to sunset. I can't remember which year. In advance, it said that by January of a year it was going to be sunset, and then there was another issue like turning on HSTS on unencrypted, and when we looked at it, it was like, oh, that date, that was like last year or something like that. So the date that we told people it was going to be sunset had long passed, and we hadn't actually physically cut it off. So I think, there is a warning or was a warning. I mean, I don't think we
What's
ever
the
took the warning
full
away.
domain name? It's unencrypted dot.
Unencrypted.node.js.org. But the problem is, if you've ever gone there in a web browser and got redirected to HTTPS, HSTS will always take you to the HTTPS version of the site.
Right, I'm just like, I get a not found. I guess maybe you need to specify something more specific.
Maybe we're no longer running the Nginx server.
Nginx is running because it's Nginx that
Okay.
says not found, but like I just went to unencrypted.nodejs.org on its own.
At the root of the server, there's nothing anymore. It was the website, but now it's served by Vercel. I think you need to go to /download.
Slash
Okay.
dist works.
Right, that's what I was figuring. Okay, right. So that still shows up.
So I guess if we have concerns over the rsync thing, then maybe a brownout is the way to go.
So like I think like changing the
DNS entry should be fairly straightforward.
right,
I
and
guess
that won't affect the
it will
down
affect
like the
anyone
HTTP
trying.
download, right?
It will affect anyone trying to connect to unencrypted.nodejs.org because it will, when you do the DNS lookup, it will read it. It will give you a different IP address.
Sure, but like I thought we'd already turn on like HSTS. So like
So HTTPS doesn't stop you getting to HTTP. It says if you go to HTTP in a client that supports HSTS, your client from then on will always go to HTTPS. I don't know how that affects rsync or if it affects rsync. It will definitely affect you if you use a web browser.
right. So I guess what I was going
We
like
had
on
those
the web
conversations when
browser, it should be okay.
yeah.
Is that right?
Sorry?
Like from the pure web browser perspective, you'd be okay. It shouldn't change.
Yes, but
Right.
I don't think that's the case we're concerned about here. I think the question is around whatever, if it's 30 odd hosts that are still are thinking, are
Yeah,
they
I was
still
just trying to
hosts or are
clarify
they
the different
legacy
things
things?
that could be affected. So HTTP shouldn't be an issue. It's just the rsync.
Yeah.
Well, I think, like you said, there, we were trying to basically,
So probably, unfortunately, because we turned off the website, we've probably lost the notice that told people it was being sunset.
sure.
But
like
Yeah.
in terms of the rsync, is it that they just have to allow the rsync with encryption, or is it like rsync
I
no
am not
longer
that
work?
familiar with rsync. I mean, I know enough to look at how we're using it in our own infrastructure, but I
Sure.
don't know in terms of like the actual technical stuff on a wider basis. I guess people who would be doing it might either be running their own mirrors of the downloads, or I don't know. I don't know what they're doing with it. Or, unencrypted existed before I joined the build working group, so it's always been there.
Sure. But it's like rsync, would that have been something extra we were running just on unencrypted and not on the other one? Or is it like, do we think it was that we were running it on both, but in one case
No,
you
no,
could
no.
rsync,
We were
right?
never running it. Oh, sorry, we are not running it on direct.
Right. So people will just not be able to rsync anymore. That's the impact.
Does rsync need a daemon, or does it just go over like?
It does have an rsync daemon that
Okay.
and the rsync config shows that we're sharing home dist node.js and home dist io.js as two separate sort of rsync endpoints.
Yeah. I mean, probably someone out there's probably still rsync in io.js, but yeah, I don't know.
It would have to be
Yeah.
like, because rsync is often authenticated, right? So like this is unauthenticated rsync.
Yeah.
I mean, it does seem like turn off rsync and wait X amount of time until somebody's like, hey, something broke. And we find out, maybe it's a key piece of infrastructure that supports some other key piece of infrastructure that it's important, or, I don't know how else to discover who's actually
Yeah.
using
Okay.
this.
It's like, I mean, Richard, I think our previous thing about turning on HSTS, like that's separate from not allowing you to rsync, right?
Yeah, I think it's separate. I mean, I think the big question there is we weren't sure if it would affect, we were not sure if turning on a HSTS would affect rsync, but
Okay.
we came to the conclusion that if it did, we'd let people know, for years previously that the offering was being sunset. So we had issues. We did have a page that you could land on that, told people that it was being sunset. That page may not be there anymore, given changes with the website and how things were served. So, if we've turned off the Nginx parts that were serving web pages, that message may not be there anymore. But it was there for years before. But then, if you're rsynching, maybe you're not actually going in a web browser to check messages. So yeah, I guess maybe we do just turn it off, see if people complain. I say turn it off, change, update the DNS entry and see what happens. I mean,
I would be like, maybe we should plan it as a, turn it off for a day, turn it back on, and see if there's any, right? Like be prepared to turn it back on
Mhm.
rather than just saying like, just be prepared, right? It's like, okay, we turn it off and like we're planning to turn it back on a day. Like that's a way to signal to people, well, like you're gonna have to move. So it could be like we turn it off for a day. That gives the people time to like open an issue, whatever. Then a couple weeks later, we plan to turn it off for a whole week, right? And then, it gives people time to transition if they need to transition, right?
Okay.
I found some history on the
Yep.
rsync endpoint and issue number 55. So,
Yeah.
but it talks about establishing it and everything else. So, at least we have some see what's going on. And HSTS is talked about here, but
Yeah, there's another issue which I could probably find that talks about the whole let's turn HSTS on. That drove for a while. So I guess was updating DNS one of the things that we talked about, like the foundation handling, or you handling, Ryan? Because I mean we could
sorry.
still do that. I mean, any of the build working group could still update the DNS entry, but I wonder if
Yeah,
that's one of
I
the
can
things
do
that
that
you want.
if that's what we want to do.
I mean, that's I guess that sounds like a reasonable suggestion that, we turn it off for a day, see if people complain, maybe turn it off a bit later. I just think we just need to make sure that, we've planned it out so that we know an answer one way or the other ahead of May, and to give you enough time in case it turns out that we need to, well, if it turns out that someone does need this, then to give us enough time to discuss that, ideally not waiting for another meeting, but whether that's in Slack or online or, in an issue. Hopefully in an issue, if someone actually does see something and they open an issue, we can discuss it there.
Because I
Yeah.
mean, you say, Ryan, already people are still using it, right?
Yeah, I just found like there's that rsync issue lists some people that are like, hey, we've set up mirrors using this now, and I just found one of those mirrors, and it's it's mirroring based off that rsync. So
It might just be like, could we set up a smaller machine that just does that and like make that the new unencrypted? Like basically have it just be a small machine that only does that rsync, and then
Is the machine that large anyway? I mean, it's got a lot of disk space. I just don't know that it was. I can't remember if it was particularly large in terms of like CPUs and memory.
and it seems like it would be a ill-advised idea to put the rsync on the web node, right?
yeah, because it's like we're giving kind of like unauthenticated access to it. I
Yeah.
don't know.
It's an attack surface that we probably don't want, I suppose.
Yeah, let's. I think I'd prefer not to try and put extra things on the DigitalOcean drop that aren't already there. Not without some careful thought, because like you say, there is potential issues. About,
Yeah, I think we'd almost want to try and move. Like it'd be nice to better, like we don't have good. I don't think we're 100% confident or Ansible of that main node, so it would actually be better to have as little as possible on there and maybe strip things out versus adding anything new, and to get to the point where eventually we could get rid of it, right? Like,
yeah. I mean, the question here was, can we just get rid of it? I guess we're slightly unsure now.
yeah.
Well, it as far as its role in the acting as a backup to Cloudflare, to the backup of the backup, like I think
Yeah.
that probably is no longer necessary. But seeing that that it is providing an rsync endpoint that people are using to create mirrors, maybe maybe only 30 or 40 people are doing that, but maybe those are key to somebody else's workflow. Like,
and these are just wild suggestions, and maybe the problem is it will take time to develop. Maybe possible to do rsync via like a Cloudflare worker and get everything served off R2.
yeah, no,
I don't know. So, but yeah, it's a good question. I
well,
mean, we've
I've
already
got a lot to run on
migrated.
here, so
Yeah, okay. We had already migrated the backup server, hadn't we? So I mean, we've got backups. So backups aren't a problem. This is only a question of the rsync service on unencrypted that isn't on any of the other machines.
So it sounds like we should try and migrate it, like from the discussion, right? Like it's being used. There's not an easy, yeah, it's just totally unused.
well, so we need to migrate the rsync service to somewhere,
right,
and then shut the old machine down. So now it may be possible that like Richard said, that there is a way to create an rsync service off of an R2 bucket.
Sure.
That may exist. There may be, build a worker, make an rsync service, and people can rsync off the bucket. That might be possible. Or if it's not, then we can move this rsync service to one of the MNX hosts. It'll be a lot easier to do that than to set up Nginx on that host and get it serving up
Sure.
traffic, everything else.
Yeah.
And so if all I'm moving is the rsync service, that's actually like a lot lower hanging fruit, and should be, might actually just be the easiest path to just do that.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking, is like set up some new machine that will just support the rsync, and then we can flip the DNS over, right? And see like, oh, does anybody complain? No. Okay, we'll leave it that way. Like again, it might still be worthwhile to like plan to do it for a day, see if we get a raft of people complaining, then turn it on, might be worth staging, or I don't know, just turn it on, but be ready to go back if we do get complaints. But totally agree that like let's try moving just what we think is needed over. Okay, so
Great.
Ryan, you've got that in your list of things to look at in terms of the other two. Why don't we just turn them off?
Okay.
Like,
I mean,
I don't see why we wouldn't, right? Like,
yeah, I mean the main thing is it doesn't really bias anything because they're not actually machines. There's one big machine and everything on it, and it's a big SmartOS host,
okay,
and everything inside of it is VMs. And so we can
sure,
turn
but we
those
might as well
VMs
just
off and
take those off the
disable them.
list. They're done, right? Like,
Yeah, we'll remove them from the inventory.
yep. And then for unencrypted, find option to support rsync, and then plan move, right? Okay. Any other discussion on that? Because I guess that one you're saying, Richard, has a hard deadline of May, or else somebody has to start paying, right?
That's what the communication from Equinix Metal is suggesting, yes.
Right.
I don't know who would be, whether that would be MNX or the foundation. It might be MNX. I don't know. But I mean that's the implication.
Yeah. Okay, the next issue in the agenda was macOS refuses to start Node when download from the tarball. I
No
don't
one's worked on that, so
anybody is, yeah, so there's no update on that, right?
no. We skipped the Orca issue.
Yep, okay, I will go back and we'll update. Right, so infrastructure for 2024.
I have a lot to say.
Good.
So our everything is transitioned over to the Orca 3 cluster now. We are fully on it. The old cluster and all the old machines are retired. We no longer need them or use them. The existing infrastructure gives us 2 Intel nodes and 2 ARM nodes, which each of those nodes are capable of housing 2 VMs comfortably as far as the amount of CPU and stuff that's available. The Intel nodes are older. They're on older CPUs because Apple stopped making Intel, and they're slower. They're 8 times slower, which I think is not supposed to be the case. I think there is probably something at odds with the way that the shared file systems are being mounted, because when I try and interact with the shared file systems, like an LS takes like 25 seconds before it responds. And so I don't know if there's anything I can do about that besides keep pinging Mac Stadium and be like, hey, the 9P file system that you're using on Intel versus the VirtIOFS on ARM, it seems like we want the VirtIOFS on the Intel as well, but I don't know if Mac Stadium is going to want to put any resources into kind of back propagating that better performing mount stuff to their Intel stuff when they're probably like hoping it all retires soon too. So I'm not sure what we can do about the performance of those x64 builds. They're
The
taking
shared
around
file system is
the C
for the
cache,
C cache, right?
right? So if there's no C cache, then those Intel machines take about 8 hours to run the builds. So this allows us to, spin up a new machine, use this shared C cache, but it's still slow to access it. And I'm not 100% sure that it's IO bound. It might not be that at all. I might get this fixed and have something and realize that just the CPUs are just slow, and they're just not up to snuff to running. But it seemed like our old builds on the old things were not taking 2 hours. Or am I?
No,
Do we have any?
no, like we have everything would run. Anybody else correct me if I'm wrong, but I think like an hour was about the threshold where we were like, no, that's not good enough, right? So I'm
Yeah.
pretty sure they all were like, maybe not for a fresh one, but like with the C cache, you know.
Yeah, the release, I need to make sure that the release is, yeah, thanks, Michael. The release I don't think that's mounting the C cache yet. I need to go and update those images to make sure that it's using that. So I just want to get it all. I've been kind of like working on the testing, trying to get it to where it's like this is what we're doing, as opposed to taking a few steps. But yes, I can look at that and make a tweak to that in the midterm.
That release PKG build does build Node twice. It builds it once for x64 with Rosetta and once for ARM64, and then creates a universal binary and installer. So yeah, we would like that time to come down, but it probably will be twice the time.
Yeah.
of
Yeah.
but yeah,
it should be able to be a lot faster because I don't think those are using the C cache.
Okay.
And C cache does help with the releases too, right? Like that's not.
Yes.
It's just,
we
okay.
we do have them on the other release machines.
Okay.
We just have them separate so they're not using the C cache from the the test infra.
The other issue that I'm kind of bummed about a little bit is the release machines. They're only being used like twice a day, and then they're not being used. And so the idea of having the ephemeral nodes is like, well, we could keep testing in the meantime. One problem I'm running into is like if there's a lot of pull requests and there's a lot of things backed up in the queue on the testing side, release can't get a machine to run a release, and the release obviously has priority. So I don't know what to do other than just provision the existing test infrastructure to only max out at 3 machines. So there's always room for a release machine to be spun up. And that's how I have it configured right now. I wish there was a way to build in a priority, but the problem, we have 2 different Jenkins, so they can't really communicate with each other and they can't really manage that. So I just don't see any other way around it other than there's just release capacity that sits around waiting for releases to happen.
So like if we can't really share them, does it make sense to just have things spin up and stay up? Which makes
well
not require
the spinning up and staying up issue, the value of the ephemeral nodes is that we didn't have disks filling up, and there wasn't like that, like as time goes on, the bit rot that just continues to happen. So this would allow us to have a fresh instance each time. So that's still valuable. We could set the timeout on them to be a lot longer, and so that they spin up and stay up for a longer period of time.
I guess I'm just like if we can get the C cache, if we can get reasonable speeds out of them, okay. But like if we can't really get any, like having the not fill up with stuff is good, but if it means it's 5 hours instead of 1, like
right. Well, the 5 hours
are going to want.
The 5 hours is because they're misconfigured right now for the release machines. That's that one. The Intel one, that might be a good experiment to just not use the shared file system, spin up the Intel ones and let them exist for a long time and see if their build times go down drastically. And if it is that way, it's using local disk instead of this mount point. Like that would allow me to determine whether or not the mount point is the issue or whether it's just CPU.
Right. Yeah. So like that would be a good experiment to, because like if that immediately gets it to 1 hour, I think we would want to flip it to doing that for a while until we can figure out the longer term solution, right?
Yeah, the ARM ones I'm confident will be short because that OSX 13 release package, that's all running on the ARM ones. The ARM ones are only running in 15 minutes. They're fast.
Right. Okay.
They're really fast builds. It's just the Intel ones that are like 2 hours, and then the Intel release is long too. So
okay. So yeah, no, I'm just thinking that like it got me thinking because like if we're not going to get all the benefits, like maybe. So, but it sounds like on the release ones, you're not too worried about being able to get them to work properly.
I'm not too worried about the ARM portions of them to get to build, because there's the release package and then there's the one that's ARM and the one that's Intel, and it's the Intel one that I'm worried about. That
but yeah, release package doesn't run on Intel VMs; it runs on the ARM VMs. But it does build Intel binaries, but it does that via Rosetta too.
Right, that's what I was gonna say. Like for the release side, what do we do with Intel these days? Is it older releases
We
or
are still, I think we're still building tarballs for
Yeah,
Intel.
tarballs. That's it.
Yeah. I
okay?
mean, it might take, I don't know what it would take in terms of engineering. It's possible we could build those in Rosetta because we're doing that for the PKG build. So I suspect we could possibly build the x64, the Intel Mac OS binaries on an ARM machine using Rosetta 2. You know, I don't know what the
Yeah, but
risk is.
it takes 5 hours on the ARM machine
Yeah, I mean, if it
to
takes
to
so
build.
yeah, if it takes
Yeah,
that
yeah, I
long,
know there's no
Well, but it won't take 5 hours on the ARM machine. That's because the ARM machine currently doesn't have a C cache. It's just starting fresh every time. So
Yeah,
that's
but
just a
even without a C cache, it shouldn't take that much. I have an ARM Mac, and it takes like 20 minutes to build Node with it.
really. Hmm.
Okay, I have more CPUs than what's allocated to the Jenkins machines. I don't know how many they have.
The Jenkins have five for a release, 5 nodes or 5 cores. But
Yeah,
with
5
the
is a
with
lot.
the C
Yeah.
cache, the test machines are only running in 15 minutes. So I'm assuming that this run should take like 30 minutes at most, 30, 40 minutes, something like that. So let me make sure that those are running, and I'll get the release
Mhm.
machines
But
faster.
maybe the x64 emulation is very slow, and we cannot do anything about it
right.
except
You're
adding
saying
C
maybe the
cache.
Intel part of the build is what takes a long time.
Oh yeah, we should be able to see that in the console output, right? Like the elapsed time.
Yeah, probably.
Okay, so I think we're down to 5 minutes. So I'm going to say, like on this one, it's good to hear everything's transitioned over, but it sounds like everything, or the main point is that some runs are still way too slow, right?
Yeah,
And that includes the Intel testing, Intel build slash test, and the release jobs, right?
right. And there's one other point on this whole is that we're running Mac OS 13 with a unusual way of installing Xcode that allowed us to get Xcode 16 on those machines.
Right.
If you were to just use a laptop, you would not be able to do this. You have to do it all through the command line. But the command line didn't tell me I couldn't, so I didn't know I wasn't supposed to. Um, the so transitioning these to OS X 14 images. So as far as testing goes, I'm not sure I understand what the requirements around testing are as far as what OS we're testing on. Are we just wanting to test on a Mac OS version that works and assume that older versions of Mac OS, if we build for those targets, it'll work? Or like
I
what's
think effectively that's what we've been doing because we've been limited in terms of what we actually have available. I I'm not sure there's been many, probably when we had like 1015 as the minimum and we had 1015 max, but I'm sure at one point the minimum supported thing was like 1013, but I don't think we ever had 1013 running anywhere in the Node CI. So there's some assumption that setting that minimum deployment target does the right thing for macOS. Um, and the testing is just trying to validate that, I guess. But then like we've never fully had we've always got a minimum equivalent to test on. So I'm, if that it, I think sort of whatever makes sense, I guess, in terms of what can we actually get, and then what makes it easier to keep going, and possibly just I think having at least some testing, but
yeah,
whether that's on some, I mean, because it's always unclear on macOS, like there's no real defined life cycle dates. Apple just like stops without
yeah,
announcing that this is not supported anymore. So the expectation on users, I think, is to be on like something current, but then we know users, not just on macOS, but anywhere, are very reluctant to upgrade to things if they're not, absolutely pushed to do it.
Yeah.
So we do have only 2 minutes and we're
Yeah.
going to be cut off because there's another meeting. I think to paraphrase Richard, just tell me if this is wrong, is like we've been forced into running on whatever we can get and trusting the setting that says here's the minimum target. And that's actually never have been a problem, right? So moving to 14, I think we just make is fine. Isn't anybody in
Okay.
disagreement with that?
I agree.
Okay. So that gives us the one more thing on the agenda was the state of the R2 migration. Is
I
that
don't know the
done?
actual. I don't know the real state. I have seen there are still a few issues being opened on the worker repository to do with like sim linking and stuff. So I think there might be a few issues still, but yeah, I don't know the exact state.
Is there anything we need to chat about though? Like it's like there's always going to be a few things, but I think it's basically done, maybe.
I think I'd be comfortable closing it. I don't know however other people feel
Or
on
maybe
it.
taking it off the build agenda anyway, right?
Yeah, let's just take it off the build
Okay.
agenda.
Okay, great. And that gives us just under the 1 minute. So I'll say thanks to everybody for attending and for all the work that's done. And we'll see you all in GitHub and next time. Thanks.
Great. Thanks.
Okay,
Bye.
bye.
Thanks. Bye.